welcome.
All right, hey everyone. So I'm a little bit more traditional than them. I've got a bunch of slides and then using Unity, which is less interesting than cool procedural stuff. Hopefully interesting enough. So we're going to talk about narrative control in HitchHiker. Martin showed you a little bit of the trailer. It is a narrative-driven game, so we're mostly doing scripted dialogue kind of stuff. And the biggest problem that we had is working with our narrative director. And that's pretty much the problem that I'm going to talk to you about today. So first, hi, I'm Eyal. I'm that. I use Unity. I worked on a bunch of mobile stuff. I worked on Ori and the Blind Forest. And then I'm working on HitchHiker. And I was bad at layout. So yeah. The company that I worked for is Mad About Pandas. They've been making a ton of projects for a very long time, as you can see. I can put up like 30 more images, but I stopped at about 7, I think. And Truck Simulator, which is the best. And then we come up to HitchHiker. So they brought me on to work on this project. The concept they already had, and I started solo, and the team grew to about 7 people, about 8 months, and this thing is out on Humble Trove. So if you have Humble Monthly, you can actually play this. It's on the Humble Trove. There you go. Arrow. We're there. That's a web page. You can actually get this. So what am I talking about? A narrative-driven experience, like I said. The core game loop is basically the driver is talking to you, and then you do something, and you interact with him. Very minimal interaction. But what we originally wanted is somewhere between, I would say, a Telltale game, which is a movie, basically, and Monkey Island. You know, you've got an inventory, you've got a lot of interaction. We wanted to be there. We're kind of here. But that's what came out. It's a prototype. Again, it's a prototype and not a full game. So, what do we actually need here? What's the actual problem that I want to talk to you about today? Writing a narrative direction is the most important thing about this game. That is kind of the point. The narrative director isn't a very technical person, and he's kind of my client. I was going to build a tool for him that he's going to work and put most of the content in place. Because again, this is a scripted game, right? And this tool needs to be easy, right? It needs to be, I think tech, but he thinks narrative direction. So we need to talk together, and I make something that's uncomfortable, he uses it, and iteration is key. You all know that. So it's a fully scripted game. Player choice, just divert the script. The thing that makes the most sense is a big node tree, and we have a node tree. You'll get to see some nodes. And the question was, what's a node? Again, I'm thinking tech. He's thinking narrative. So I'm kind of thinking about it in technical terms, and I need to make sure that it's comfortable for him. It came out that these nodes are one thing that happens, one single interaction, and then he can string them together, and if there's an option, it diverts. All right? The nodes also use static systems. If we're talking about tech strictly, if you know Unity a little bit, we ended up using scriptable objects. These are basically containers of information. And these nodes use static systems that exist in the game. So the node just tells something, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want some sound, I want some animation. And that's kind of how it works. So, Unity? Cool. So first of all, hopefully Unity is, you get to see enough, I hope. This is actually the narrative system controller. This is the most important system in our game. And it holds different sequences. As you can see, there's 21 of them, but really there's about 8 different segments to the gameplay. And other sequences, some sequences can run in parallel at the same time. And that's kind of represented here in the sense that we have more than just the 8 main ones. We've got an intro, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H. And then we've got some other ones that sometimes loop or happen on the side of things. Now, what is an actual sequence? This is the big sequencer that has a start, and it'll keep going from there. A sequence specifically, if we'll go into pretty much any one of them, kind of looks the same way. We've got a first node. This is where we start, and then we keep going. What's the next node? There's always a next node. The basic node always has the next one. What's the next thing? And if I'll actually go into one of the nodes, these are just a ton of nodes that we're using. You can see in the inspector, and let me go into maybe a simple one. This is a very simple node that we have in the game. All of this is Unity, and if you're unfamiliar with Unity, Unity has very powerful editor capabilities that allow me to basically customize everything. So a lot of what you're seeing here is customizable. This is a simple wait node. It waits. It's just like, I want you to just do nothing for 3 seconds or for a random amount of time. So the special things in this node are very simple. What I want to focus on is the standard things that are always there. And the main one here is max node runtime, for example. This one basically says, this node takes 2 seconds. After 2 seconds, I'm going to move to the next node. Okay, I'm going to wait, and then I'm going to cough, apparently. So we're going to go from D000 to D0001. And here, we're going to have coughing. So how do we do coughing? This is actually an instance of driver, right? Am I correct? Yes, this is a driver talk node. This is the most useful, most used node in our game. There are nodes that are used once or twice because they do something super specific. This node basically makes the driver talk. And what's cool to see here is that we actually have audio, we've got text, and we've got animation. There was a really big process of iteration here to, I want the driver to talk, I want him to animate, and I want script on the screen, because you actually hearing him talk, there's full voice work for the driver, but you also want to see the script. And we began by having multiple nodes, and eventually we came to one big node that has a bunch of arrays of all the audio. You have exactly the length, and there's a lot of work in making everything perfect. The audio, the script, you want it to sync up. You want him to eat a raisin and move and animate as he's talking, that it makes sense with what he's saying. So all of that is here, and our narrative director could tweak it perfectly, give him another second here, another pause there, in order to make it work exactly as he wants to. So this is kind of what a node looks like. And that is a spider. And as you can see, each one of these sequences just has a bunch of nodes in them. So where does it all come together as my computer, very old computer, trudges along? The narrative sequence editor. This is the biggest tool. This is actually the tool that you work with. This is a window that doesn't exist in Unity itself, and we built. And it reads off of whatever sequence that I click on. So if I actually move this over here and click any one of these sequences, again, these are prefabs that hold a sequence and a bunch of nodes inside them. If I click on D, it'll change to sequence D and all of my nodes. And as you can see, there's a lot of stuff, and then we start with a lot of connections. Clearly, this isn't perfect and doesn't look wonderful. Again, it's a prototype still, so there's a lot of bugs in the system, and they're mostly my fault. But the way to work here for our narrative director, this is something you can work with. This is something you can actually make narrative with. And you can see a tree that goes step by step through the incredibly only scripted gameplay that we have here. And when you click any one of these nodes, you see it in the inspector. There are also quite a lot of debug features that unfortunately I can't show you, because if I press play, my computer will crash, of course. But there's a lot of debug features showing you which sequence you're in, which node you're in, and as you're moving forward. And this is super important to really know exactly where I am in the narrative for my director and keep on moving. So by the way, if there's any questions, this is a great time to ask them. I can also move on to some conclusions, I guess. So questions? Anyone? And if not, we do have a bunch of conclusions that I had here. Slowly. So working with your narrative direction as a client, iteration is really key, because I suck at his experience of making narrative direction. I had no idea how to think about it initially, and just working with him was really, 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 really useful. And he told me what he wanted, and the amount of times that the system changed is a lot, like a lot. Streamlining his workflow is the most important thing to get the job done, especially when you don't have a lot of time or budget, which are the same thing in our case. And it really is, you really want to work with him very, very, very closely, which you can't always do. In our case, he was working 1 day a week. I was working full time, he was working 1 day a week. So the time that I had with him was incredibly precious. There were also thoughts about, I built that node system. There are also thoughts about getting something pre-made. If you're working with Unity, there's the asset store, there's a ton of node systems. And I wanted to make something simple that works exactly for us. Looking back, probably a mistake, because there's a lot of really good stuff. And making nodes very generic seems like a great idea. Making stuff super simple so that you can always change it and make it better seems incredibly important. There's always a question when you're building tech for me. Do you make it generic, which will take longer, but it'll work for more things, or do you go super specific and just build exactly what you need, but then if you need to change it, it's going to take you even longer. That's about it for me. If you've got any questions, we can go back to Unity and talk about them.